Today, I'm have the great pleasure of speaking with a great friend of mine and a great colleague, Bobby Braxton. Bobby is a founding member of the law firm of Braxton Perrone law firm in the Metroplex in Waco. I've worked with Bobby for a number of years. He has extensive background in patent and trademark litigation law. Bobby, thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. Absolutely.
Bobby, tell our listeners who Bobby Braxton is. Introduce yourself.
Sure. Absolutely. So I'm a Panhandle kid, grew up in Amarillo, Texas, met my wife in high school sweethearts. I did the math pretty quick and realized I peaked in high school and this was as good as I was going to get. So I locked her down as quickly as I could, and always wanted to do engineering when I was 13. My mom kind of suggested something. I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a chemical engineer. And so went off to A&M, studied chemical engineering, but I just loved this inventorship, this patenting different things. And as much as I wanted to be a real engineer, I liked patents. I just liked invention. I thought that was neat to come up with a solution to a problem that no one else had. And so she put us through law school. We went back to the Panhandle, went to school at Tech, had a great time there, loved city of Lubbock. And then came to the Metroplex, joined a firm, kind of a large boutique there in Dallas. And as you know, working at a larger firm, you kind of get to see a lot of everything, right? You know, they have everything from the small projects to the large litigation. And so it was a great spot. Was there for a long time until three of us kind of decided, I'd like to give this a shot on our own. So we branched out and started, at the time, Braxton Perrone, and it was great. I was actually jealous of my wife. She was an entrepreneur. She had her own business, and it was her baby, right? She was staying up working late nights because it was her baby. And as much as I liked the practice of law, the firm wasn't my baby, and so I kind of needed to have more of a hand in it. And so we thought, well, let's give it a shot. And it's been a blast ever since. Since then, we've had two kiddos, and they're 5 and 7, about to be 5. And so just having all the fun that comes with that.
So are you an Amarillo Sandy, or are you a Tascosa Rebel?
I was a Randall Raider.
Raider?
Randall Raider, yes, sir. So we were kind of on the south side of town, and my wife went to Canyon the first couple of years and then transferred to Randall. And so, we're Randall through and through.
Bobby, I probably knew at some time that you were from Amarillo, but I had forgotten that.
World, right?
For the listeners, I kind of quarterback, kind of as a general counsel for many businesses, and I've got a team that I rely on, and Bobby Braxton is, when there's an IP question, Bobby Braxton is the guy that I call, and the great thing about Bobby Braxton being on my team, it's almost as if he's down the hall, because for those of you who need an IP attorney, I call Bobby, and that day, sometimes almost immediately, it's like he's walking in my office and just takes such good care of my clients. So and the reason I say that is because I just had forgotten that you were from Amarillo. We've been working together for so long.
Sure. No, absolutely. No, I appreciate the kind words. Yes, I think that was our original kind of connection, how we first met each other, but then we've been working together so long, that's kind of not the common glue anymore. We've just worked enough on everything else. So
I bet we talk at least once a month, sometimes almost weekly, but it's been great, and I appreciate that. Talk to me about, you started your own firm. Talk to me about leadership. What do you think, for our listeners, whether they be young attorneys thinking about going out on their own, or even just young business people, or perhaps even students, what do you think are important leadership skills?
Sure. No, I think as obviously it's a work in progress our whole lives trying to figure out how to crack this nut. But I think that the thing I'm realizing now as a leader kind of in this firm and just in life in general is, you don't have to be the master of everything. And there's a lot of wisdom in realizing what you're not good at. There's a lot of wisdom in kind of self-diagnosing and realizing, hey, this is my weakness, so I'm going to rely upon someone else here. I think my general philosophy on leadership, I guess, is luckily I'm a very optimistic person, and I think that helps a lot because you know, I kind of come in here and just assume it's all going to work out, and you know, smile your way through it, and there's a bright side to everything. Obviously, you know, that's not always the case, but I think for our firm, that's one of the things I think I bring to the table. And the other thing, like I say, is finally kind of maturing enough to realize, you know, it's actually a positive to be able to say, hey, I'm not so good at this. I should probably turn to someone else and let, you know, they're pros for a reason. Let's lean them on that.
Well,
So that's the general philosophy is, hey, you know, that a team works, and, you know, all this teamwork stuff that we're taught in school, and it seems like, yeah, why are we doing this project and stuff? But it, like you and I work together all the time and ping things back and forth, and, you know, 4 eyes are better than 2, and, you know, a team makes it go.
well, and I love that answer, by the way. I love that answer. We've known each other long enough. You know, I've got in your firm, you're a chemical engineer, are you not? Yeah, chemical engineering. One of your partners is a structural engineer. Both graduated hors d'oeuvre. And then your third partner is studying microbiology. And I mean, you guys are the captains of the nerds.
That's 100% right. We are the captains of the nerds. That's all 3 of us. Yeah, absolutely. And that's you know, you take the good with the bad with that, right? You know, that's like say I did the math quickly, right? I knew, hey, there's 50,000 people at A&M, 25,000 dudes. I better lock this up very quickly in high school. I knew, you know, my stock was going down, so 100%. We are captains of the nerds, and you know, I kind of love being able to geek out every once in a while, having to pull out some of these organic books and try to kind of remember. That's been a long time, but I'm sure I could kind of figure it out here and there. So 100%, we are the king of the nerds. That's true for the whole industry.
And before our listeners tune off for me saying that, I say that very tongue in cheek because I love working with Bobby. He's not a nerd, but he's incredibly smart. And I order of the coif as is his partner. So it's just so let me ask you this: what is IP law?
Sure. So intellectual property is basically any idea that you have. You know, you have all this sweat equity that goes into research and R&D and figuring something out, having those eureka moments, and intellectual property gives us an avenue to protect those. Whether it's your brand, you know, the Nike swoosh or anything like that, some of those are intangible properties, but they're still valuable. So whether it's your brand or if you know, have the next greatest mousetrap, if you go through the time and effort to uncover that, then the federal government says, hey, in exchange for you showing the world your secret sauce, we'll give you a limited monopoly. So intellectual property covers kind of all that: patents, trademarks, copyrights, and it gives you a way to protect, hey, some of these, maybe you have products or something else, but the actual intellectual thoughts behind that product gives you a way to protect it.
Well, and so what you've talked about it a little bit, but what drew you to that area of the law, Bobby?
Sure. So again, going back to my killer days as a middle school guy here. So I was always inventing random little things, and one of the things I tried to invent, I thought at the time, and forgive me if you've heard this story before, Johnny, but it's 100% true.
Please.
When I was in middle school, microwavable popcorn, the instructions were put this bag of popcorn in the microwave and then sit there with your ear next to this, you know, radiation emitting box and listen and count the seconds of silence between kernel pops. And, you know, wait, when it's 3 to 4 seconds, pull it out. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this is such a terrible way to measure when your popcorn's finished. I thought, what we need, instead of this paper bag, we need a transparent popcorn bag that has a red line, right? So that when the popcorn gets to that red level, you take it out, right? I was like, you don't need to sit with your ear to this box. Just let's see when it's filled. So I tried like crazy to, every material in the house except for foil to throw it in the microwave. Let's see if we can make a transparent popcorn bag. And I failed miserably. And that's when I was talking with my mom, and I was like, who solves these problems? And she said, chemical engineers solve these problems. And I was like, boom, I'm going to be a chemical engineer. So I never even thought of anything else, never changed my major, but it was all driven by who can solve these problems. There's these unique problems. Someone's going to get a skill set to solve these problems. I would like that skill set. I don't have that skill set anymore, but I wanted that skill set. And so, and then I was just so attracted to the idea of innovation and change. And so I went to law school. I was one of those that went to law school and was like, I'm not taking any evidence. I'm not going to be a courtroom guy. I want to write patents. Don't bother me with that stuff. And life has a way of kind of mixing it up on you, and I'm glad it has.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you say that you didn't want to do courtroom stuff and evidence stuff, and yet, isn't that part of what you do?
That's a good part of what we do. Yes, sir. That's funny how that happens, right? So yeah, I thought, oh, I just want to sit in a room by myself and write patents all day, work with inventors. And I was blessed enough to work at a firm initially that to be exposed to both sides, the prosecution and the litigation. And man, I love them both. And I'll just tell you how it used to be in the intellectual property world was you were kind of an anointed one or the other on your first day out of law school. You're like, you're a litigator, you're a prosecutor.
Right.
Sit at lunch tables, don't talk to each other. You're going to write patents, you're going to litigate patents. That's how it used to be. And when I got in, it was still kind of like that. And I think it's getting better now, but I think that's a terrible method. As if you write a contract that never gets litigated and you don't understand why some of these clauses are in there. And it's the same on the patent side. When you write a patent, if you never litigate it, you don't realize how important that comma is, or something like that. But if you spend 2 years of your life arguing over what that comma modifies, it makes you write a better patent. And so yeah, I've been blessed enough to be able to do both, and I think they both feed on each other and make you a better litigating contracts makes you a better contract drafter, and litigating patents makes you a better patent drafter. So that's helped.
Let me, great answer. I love that. Let me back up a second and ask you kind of a selfish question. My son is in his last quarter of law school at Baylor. Actually awesome. Coming to Dallas. He wants to be a litigator. And so I said, listen, if you want to be a litigator, you need to either go to a prosecutor's office or an insurance defense firm. Otherwise, you're just going to learn discovery. But young attorneys, we typically do what comes in the door. I mean, sometimes we don't get to choose what we get to do. So how, backing up again, tell me, you wanted to be an IP attorney. Were you able to pick a firm? Is that how you did that?
Yes. I was lucky enough to get hired on at a patent firm that I clerked at in law school. And so it was just dumb luck that they had a mix of litigation and prosecution. And, sometimes when you have the work, you just throw bodies at it. So it was truly dumb luck that I kind of got, exposure at both. But for your son, you're right. I mean, I think, as going to Baylor, that's a slam dunk. I don't think I truly appreciated how valuable practice court was at Baylor. I didn't go to Baylor. And so all I heard people about, I just heard people complaining about practice court. And, being a law guy, I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't have to do that. But I will say I did not realize how valuable that is. My former law partner had gone to Baylor, and just they've got that down to a science. And that practice court, I'm sure it's miserable. I'm sure all those horror stories are correct. But, what a nice primer. So that seems like a value. He's starting off at the right foot there.
Well, let me tell you, Bobby, when we went to the orientation, both of us are tech graduates, and it really is true that the first year scares you to death, second year they work you to death, third year they bore you to death, and you're just ready to be done. And I was sitting there at his orientation listening to the professor say, your worst year will be your third year. And I'm thinking, why in the world are you going to this law school?
Absolutely, right.
But now, for any Baylor law listeners out there, now having served as a witness at practice court for one of my son's trials, Let me tell you, you guys are getting some really great training. Let's switch gears a second, Bobby. I've got a client, or I've got a business. I'm a business. Let me put it this way. I'm a business. I've created the greatest whatever, and I'm thinking, maybe this is something that is worth something. Talk to our listeners about what they should do, what they shouldn't do, and when it's time to perhaps talk to somebody like you.
Sure. No, good question. So I would say step one is you need to have a relationship with someone like yourself, either your own general counsel or someone that can act as general counsel, because the number one pitfall before I get involved is, and it's something, these issues that could easily have been avoided is, loop your general counsel in, because there might be something as simple as an employment agreement that we want to make sure is signed. Often, I'm sure you have the same experience, but set Fortune 500 companies, they're set, they've got their in-house counsel, they're good, but often a startup, the transition from startup to mid-size, they're used to, like we were talking about, doing everything themselves. So they may not loop their attorney in early. And some of these issues that could spiral into big issues right off the bat could kind of be nipped. And so I would say step one is contact your general counsel to make sure, hey, do we own this?
Right.
For a company, before we pay Bobby any money, let's make sure we own this. And so that's step one is, hey, we want to make sure that the company's formed, whichever entity is going to own the IP is formed. We have all our ducks in a row there. Because again, the worst case scenario is spend all this money and you not own it. So that's step one. The other big pitfall they need to be aware of is there is a time limitation. In Europe and other countries, you've got to have this application on file before you sell it, before you use it publicly. So if you have aspirations outside of the United States, you have to do your homework a little more in advance. You can't test it and then it goes great and hey, let's go patent it in Europe. You need to kind of be ahead of the curve. The US is a little bit more forgiving, but you essentially have 12 months from the time you first show it, display it, sell it, before you get a patent application on file. So whatever you do, maybe you can test the waters a little bit to see if, hey, does this thing have legs? But ideally, you would at least want to file something before you show it to the public. And and you and I do this all the time, that can be as simple as a quick and dirty provisional patent application. We don't know exactly how this thing works. You want to show it next week at a trade show, that's enough time for us to sit down and at least protect it so that someone at the trade show can't take it and run with it. So I think as everything in a lot of legal practices, the sooner the better. You just kind of magnify your problems by waiting. And it doesn't have to be a huge bet the company investment on the front end. We can do some things so that give you some time to kind of check and see if this thing has legs. But the longer you sit on it, the more of a problem it's going to be. So I think that to boil it down, the two issues are, step one is I would get your general counsel involved soon, because they're going to spot some issues as far as, hey, is the entity still in good standing? Do we have employment agreements? Who's going to own this thing? And then two, to the extent it has legs, get us involved as soon as possible so we're not precluded from filing. I have had some horror stories where, an inventor comes in, it's like, oh, this is our bread and butter. My whole livelihood is tied with this. And it's a eureka, awesome, game changer. And then I found out they started selling it 2 years ago. And it's like, man, I'm sorry. It's heartbreaking. We can't do anything about it at this point. So come sooner rather than later.
Great answer. And for the attorneys out there listening, make sure you've got a relationship with somebody like Bobby Braxton, because those issues pop up quickly. Let's talk about, a couple of examples. Is that I've got a client who was using some photographs for advertising that they thought that they had the right to use. All of a sudden, I needed to get Bobby involved. I have a client who is doing some publicizing. His business is publicizing information for an important industry and using certain certifications. I got a call on that. I call Bobby Braxton. So Bobby, you obviously you do this every day. Talk about some common things that businesses ought to look out for to think, hey, maybe I need to talk to somebody. I may be running into an IP issue.
Sure. No, yeah, a great question. I think you're right. I think a common one is on websites. It's so easy these days to copy and paste images. Or if you're hosting some sort of website, it's easy to allow users to post images that may infringe on somebody else. I think one thing that kind of goes overlooked are these terms of use, privacy policies on websites. I think that's a big one that not everything, but a lot of information can kind of be handled on the terms of use and privacy policy. If we have a website and we're soliciting this private information, we have an obligation to tell our customers, hey, this is the information we're collecting. Europe's a lot more stringent on that right now, but it's coming over here soon. And so I think the quicker we can kind of be ahead of the curve and say, hey, we're collecting this information. It may not be much of anything. It may just be cookies, but it might be credit card information. It may be something, that's highly confidential, highly private, and we want to be able to tell our customers on the front end, just so they know, we'll go in eyes wide open, this is what we're collecting. The other things would be, as you're talking about, I think sometimes companies don't realize the IP they have. A lot of times they don't realize this trademark is valuable. The reason people come back to me is because of my reputation. That's what I have. And so people think, well, patents must be it's Apple or Samsung or something like that. But often the most valuable piece of intellectual property is their trademark. Because as you know, your reputation is everything. And so a lot of these companies don't value their trademark as much as they should, and don't police it like they should. A lot of times, if you have someone that's pretty close to what you're doing and their trademark's pretty close, you should try and shut them down. It doesn't have to be a full federal lawsuit, but at least kind of say, hey, wait a second, you're cutting too close to the line here. This is my valuable intellectual property. This is who we are as a company, and this is what brings people to us. So you're going to have to change your ways. I think that's. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I think that's.
Oh, it does. It's a great answer, and just looking at things that you think may be unique and that you may own, that you may need to protect, right. and gosh, those things pop up more than you know it.
It does.
Let me challenge you a little bit as an IP attorney. Let's assume I've got a clamp. That's a wonderful clamp that I have. It can be anything, but a wonderful item, and so I go and patent that thing. And then one of these huge companies with unlimited resources decides, hey, you know what? I could use that clamp, and frankly, it's worth a lawsuit.
Sure.
Because we can just bury this poor Johnny Merritt. So talk to me about, is there a problem in the IP world with that type of fact situation?
No, absolutely there is. I think they call the patent infringement suit the nuclear bomb in litigation because it can just be crazy expensive. You have to have an infringement expert, which is often a PhD electrical engineer from Stanford, let's say, and her rate's not cheap, and you have to have a PhD economist, testify on damages. Just the experts alone are a fortune. And so, yes, that was a huge problem. How they've kind of solved that at times is if this company is just selling a ton of these clamps and there's enough damages pile, then there's often going to be a contingency fee plaintiff's attorney that will say, tell you what, you pay costs or we pay costs. Let's tackle this Goliath together, because there can be a pot of gold at the end. So it's worth investing my time. But even that gets difficult because, as I mentioned, one case may be, hundreds of thousands of dollars in expert fees, and so what they're doing it a lot now is if you have that successful clamp and someone's just stealing your idea, they even have investment firms now that are investing in this litigation, and they're saying, tell you what,
I love that.
Yeah, let's team together. And granted, it obviously takes more work to get that going because you have people investing their money, but they're saying, you know what, we can do this. There's money to be made, and let's team up together, and we'll either pay the costs or we'll pay Bobby and Johnny some reduced rate to kind of get this thing going, and let's see if we can go after them. So the market is coming up with solutions to that problem, but that's still a problem. And I do tell people, sometimes, it's especially in the foreign side. If they want to get an international patent, I say, well, that's great. We can go get an Italian patent, but are you ever going to sue anyone in Italy for infringement? Because if not, that's a very nice plaque, but you have no teeth to it. So, obviously it kind of depends on the jurisdiction and everything, but you're right. That's a constant problem, is how do we kind of equalize this thing if you're going up against Google or Amazon?
Well, gosh, I love your answer, because I gave you an example actually that is true in my history. I represented years ago a backyard swing set manufacturer that actually created really the guy that started this business was very creative, and he created items that were used on these swing sets that were really cool, and he got the patent. But
Awesome.
then one of the, and I won't mention the name, but one of these huge companies just buried him in litigation.
Right. Sure.
And it got where we couldn't fight it. And so I'm thrilled to hear that there are solutions being developed that addresses that problem, because it was a very valuable thing. That's the reason that big company was getting it, was still in it, frankly. And so to know that there are now creative ways to overcome that is just, I think that's great information for me, Bobby.
Sure. No, good. Yeah, that's great, because it is so unfair. I mean, and litigation can always, as you know, be inherently unfair in the David Goliath situation, but the patent side certainly magnifies it a bit, because.
So for the listener, see how the calls go with Bobby Braxton? I mean, even this, every call goes like this. I learned something new. Let's talk about COVID. How has COVID affected the IP area, and how has it affected your practice?
Right. So I think the big thing, so we had a patent infringement case going on in California, and obviously travel was limited and kind of posed some issues, I guess. And so we had, I don't know how many, 8 to 10 depositions that we had to take during COVID. And most of them, almost all of them, we took via Zoom, some third-party vendor. And, I actually really liked it. I thought we defended some, we took some, and, I think that potentially is a game changer. Obviously, there's some downsides. You don't exactly know what they're seeing in the room. There's some downsides. The upside, though, one downside, I guess, is, people are more comfortable in their own house. And so you don't get that, I'm nervous in a deposition, and I might say some things, but I think you have a style that's similar to mine. I think sometimes is, sometimes that's a benefit. If they're more comfortable, during a deposition, you don't have to terrify them to get them to say something, just having a conversation. And so I found that to be good, them kind of being in their own house and not terrified. And it was just a conversation like we're having here. And, but the cost savings to the client can be substantial, as you know, traveling forth. So I think that's a game changer that may stay on the table for a while. And at least something where it's, we even got creative in this case where one side wanted an in-person deposition, but I was going to require a 14-day quarantine. So I defended or took, I forget, remotely, but the other party was in person. So I think it's a tool that we might have in our arsenal moving forward as a cost savings tool or what have you, that might like you say, make things less expensive. I think people are so much more used to Zoom now, even just like you and I have. I've done a million more Zoom conference calls than phone calls these days, because I think people just have it, and there is something about being able to see a face, show a product, all that sort of stuff. So I think that's changed it in the positive. What about you? Have you seen kind of something similar?
It's the same thing. I mean, that answer again for the listener shows you one reason that I love working with Bobby, because if you really, as attorneys, we're service people. And so what we've got to focus on is providing a product at the best possible price for our clients.
Sure.
And so what you heard in that was Bobby thinking through, is there a better and cheaper way to accomplish the same things?
Sure.
And so yeah, I've seen the same thing. And people complain about Zoom. I get it. We like to be in the same room, but at the same time, it allows, I practice a bunch in Amarillo. I'm in Austin. I don't have to travel as much. It's faster, it's cheaper, but I still like to go in person. How about the practice of IP? Was just IP law? For instance, I was talking to a bankruptcy attorney, and 18 months ago, we were thinking bankruptcy was going to explode.
Sure.
Well,
Right.
quite the contrary, it's down 50%. And so how's it affected, the COVID affected IP?
I think I'm not sure I think the smaller and mid-sized companies, obviously, the watching the budget, all that sort of stuff. I think that's been the biggest impact. I think is some of these things that companies may consider, not quite necessary expenses. Other than that, not a whole lot. I'm sure it has, but for our clients, I think it's just like everybody else in the world. You're having to kind of watch your budget and purse strings a little better.
Right.
But that's really kind of it on the IP side that I could think of.
Okay. You have something in your website, and I invite the listeners to look at the Braxton Perrone website. It's a really nice website, by the way. But you have this quote. It says, synthesizes big firm experience with the responsiveness and agility that only a small firm can provide. What I love that. But tell me what that means.
Sure. I'm going to blame that. I assume Greg Perrone write that. We'll ask him what that means. No, I think what it is, our thinking was, and I think, your firm is very similar. As I mentioned before, some of the more complex projects and more costly projects, they go to big firms, because they have the people that can source them and all that sort of stuff. And so I was at a large boutique, and because of that, I was able to see a wider variety of things than had I just started out as a solo. Greg practiced with a lot of different national firms and got a ton of experience there. And so it was great for us because we got to take that experience. But then, as you mentioned, we are a service-oriented industry, and so we have the experience, but not all the large firm headaches, I guess, that I would say is sometimes, as you know, the large firms, not all of them, but just some of them, you may deal with a partner at this level, and so the client may deal with this level partner, but this level partner is actually making the decisions, and then this associate three layers down is actually doing the work, and I think that's fine on some things, but at the end of the day, the client might get a bill from 6 attorneys and they've only met one. And so I think our approach is to kind of, hey, look, we have an issue. You're going to talk to me or Greg, and we may hand it off to Selena or something like that. But for the most part, like, I'm your contact. And I think what that means is that stuff doesn't get lost in the handoff. Stuff doesn't get lost in translation. We have the experience that the big firms do, but you've got my cell phone, and you'll be dealing with me. And I think also, you touch on this on a lot of your podcasts, and I think it's great, is this more holistic type of approach. And I think, and I'm not speaking for every firm, but I think a lot of firms, if you're just dealing with one person and there's people 5 levels deep that are actually doing the work, that may get hard to include. If you have an intimate understanding of your client's business and arrangement, then you can spot the issues and you can tailor the approach better to them. And I think the more I do this, the more I realize, listening is such a skill, and listening and hearing what people say, because you just learn a ton, and you realize, I thought this call was going to be about X, but it's really, this is going to open up this whole can of worms, and I wouldn't have known that but for listening. And I think it's invaluable to have the person, doing the work, communicating and understanding the client's business.
Well, and again, I love that answer, Bobby. That the great thing about, for instance, the relationship you and I have developed, and the including the use of electronic media, and I feel like I've got an IP department in
Right.
my firm. And particularly with some of the new electronic developments and the way we can send documents, and particularly the ability to communicate so quickly, it allows some of us that are really not legally partners to really partner in
100%.
in a manner that provides the best services for my clients. Again, an example I often use is I'm a quarterback, and they. I get a call with the play from the client. The client raises this issue, as happened last week, and I think, you know what? I think I better call my in quotes partner, IP partner, Bobby Braxton. And so it's almost as if we can treat it as a big firm, and yet we keep it as a small firm.
100% right. No, I like that. I love that approach. And yeah, I think that's exactly right. That's what works. And that's what I was kind of talking about earlier with leadership, is realizing, hey, I need to team up with somebody else on this. I need to, a little knowledge is a bad thing. And I know someone like you that knows more about this than I do. And so, no, I agree 100%. And I think, but you can still keep it intimate. And as you say, more on the counseling side, if you know the whole big picture,
right,
you can diagnose it correctly. But if you only know one tiny aspect, and off topic kind of, but this drive towards specialization, all that sort of stuff, and I think it was like, I want to be the master of this tiny area of IP or this tiny, and I guess there's some great value in that, but the more I do this, the more I realize, you can't properly do your detail work until you have a big picture, an accurate big picture, because it all feeds in together and not every case is the same. Just as an aside, I like to run when I can, but I guess getting old happens, and so I developed some plantar fasciitis, which I'd never heard of, except I guess Tim Duncan had it a decade ago is the only time I heard it. And so I went to a foot doctor, and I'm sure this doctor was amazing at feet. I knew everything about feet, but he looked at it and said, well, I think your problem is this, wear a boot, whatever. And probably 99 times out of 100, he was right, but it didn't work for me. And so I went to it was one of these Erosti places. It's kind of like the holistic. Right. And so this guy like mashed on me for a little bit, and he said, no, you're feeling it in your foot, but the problem is your calves aren't stretched. Like I'm telling you what you need to do is you need a foam roll, which I'd never heard of, and it's miserable.
Right.
You need to foam roll that until you're crying, and do it some more. And sure enough, that's what solved it. And it was kind of a eureka moment to me that, this foot doctor knew everything in the world about feet, but he was so concentrated on my feet, he didn't look upstream, which is what was causing the problem, was this calf. And so some of those times, those moments where it's like, I'm so concentrated on this trademark, and that's great, but, let's take a step back and kind of see, hey, do we have this employment agreement? Because that's going to affect not only the trademark, but it's going to affect who knows what other labor issues that could come up. And so just kind of taking a step back, I think that was a teaching moment for me, that was like, there's value in that.
Well, let me just tell you, you better patent that story, because I'm fixing to steal it.
Good, you do it.
I'll give you credit for that. That a friend told me that story, but what a great story. Yeah, I think I must have misheard you say, my clients have my cell phone number. Did I hear that correctly?
You did. You heard that correctly, and that's good and bad, I guess. It's
well, let me tell you, Bobby, my clients have my cell phone number, and so I actually love that, because again, we're in the service business. We need to make it easy for our clients to get in touch with us.
So my cell phone's on my business card, because it's like, hey, I will reach you. I think, and I've loved it, because I think it gives you want to be reachable. So they have my office number, and I'm sure with you too, I get texts, emails, voicemails, and I want to be accessible. And that's part of our service. I think the one downside to it, and it's a me issue, not a client issue, is I think there's so many different places to check for messages now, that every once in a while one falls through the crack, because before it was like, all my stuff came through email. Yeah. Now it's like, got to check multiple email addresses, voicemail, cell phone, text. And sometimes, at the end of the day, I can go through my emails and say, hey, did I contact everybody? Am I good? but I might miss a text or something like that. But I agree with you. I mean, it's easier for me too, because I'm not always in the office, and if a problem comes up, I want to be able to there to help and assist and knock it out where, when it arises, instead of when I'm back to the office the next day, if I can.
A real quick story. If I've told you this, sorry, but the same thing is I'm constantly checking, and
Sure.
my phone is buzzing. And one thing that really frustrates my wife is when that happens in church.
Okay.
And one Sunday morning, I was sitting in church and my phone buzzed. And so I took it out, and I could feel my wife's stare. And
Right.
I looked down, and it was a client that I knew wouldn't be contacting me unless it was an absolute emergency. And so I actually walked out of the church service and called this guy, and his son had been killed the night before in a motorcycle accident.
Goodness.
And there's not much that I could do,
Sure.
but he just needed to talk.
Sure.
And so, there are times when you don't know how valuable that number may be. Bobby, fixing to just kind of get to some wrap-up questions about the practice of law, but I don't want to leave IP if, I'm not an IP lawyer, that because you're my IP lawyer. But
Right.
Is there something that is very important for our listeners to hear that we haven't covered?
Sure. So I think the big thing again is, hey, if you have an idea, and really, I would say also, I think some of our clients they're so innovative, it's just instinctual to them to do this, and so they discount how novel and unique their solution is. And so I would say err on the side of give us a call, because to them, they do it day in and day out. So this solution was so obvious that sometimes they're like, well, this, it was obvious. And it's like, it was obvious to you because you've been doing it for 20 years and you're the expert in your field, but it's not obvious to the rest of the world, and you should protect this. So the two thoughts I would kind of give is, it's worth a call to Johnny. It's worth a call to me. If there's something there, we'll tell you. If there's not something there, we do that as well. We say, hey, it's a neat idea. I don't think you can get it protected, but the consequences of a 5-minute phone call where I say, hey, I don't think there's anything here, versus waiting, those are bad consequences. So the first one is, even though you might not think you have something, give your attorney a call just to see. And then second, again, the clock is ticking. As soon as you show it to anyone, you need to write out. You need to, if you're not engaged with an attorney, you need to docket that date yourself. You've got 12 months, and there's no fixing that. So just be careful if you disclose it. Ideally, come see us before, and we can get a quick and dirty solution on file to protect you. But if we wait 2 months, there's not a lot we can do about it.
Well, and for the listeners, particularly for those practitioners who may be listening, a week ago, I was looking at a license agreement a client sent. I just got Bobby on the phone with the client and myself, and we were able to talk through, and we determined, the best person to be looking at this license agreement is not Johnny Merritt, it's Bobby Braxton. And so, practitioners, get him on the phone with you, or maybe just call him to see if you need to get him involved, because he can be most helpful. And let's make sure and cover your contact information. In fact, let's just do that now, Bobby. How's the best way for people to reach you?
Sure. So my website or my email address is braxton@braxtonperrone.com. And if you go to our website, which is braxtonperrone.com, I think I should check that, but I'm pretty sure it's braxtonperrone.com. You have our cell phone information. There's our email address. All of our partners have our phone numbers or cell phones. So reach us however, we're happy to chat. And like I think, we don't have any consultation. We want to just kind of get to know your business first, see if we can help you, see if it makes sense for you to do this. We'll just kind of chat and see if there's something that, that comes up that we can help you. If not, we'll tell you, hey, this is great, but I really don't think you need us. But just reach out, happy to chat and see if we can help.
And if you happen to miss that number, call me. Just look up at the website, call me, and I'm happy, tickled to give you Bobby's contact information. Let me cover a couple of general questions that I ask, particularly when I'm talking to attorneys. what do you consider are the top 3 qualities an attorney needs to effectively partner with his or her business clients? And maybe we've already covered that, but if you think of anything
Sure.
else.
So I think honestly, one is listening. I think both sides. I think, I think I'm too quick sometimes to pre-diagnose, like, oh, this is the problem they're going to have. And if I just listen to them talk all the way through, so I think one is listening in both ways. And you do an excellent job of that, by the way. I think what's interesting when we team up, and I think because you're so focused on the holistic approach, when you call and say, hey, give me a primer about a client, you don't just say, hey, they need a trademark. You spend 10 minutes explaining who this client is, so I understand the whole business model, because a lot of times I'm starting from zero. And I think that's great. And I think that comes from listening to your client and knowing, okay, let's get the lay of the land. And so one is listening. I think honesty is, I think your flat fee, all that stuff is huge, because you don't want to send a client a bill that's going to be surprised, and they don't want to receive a bill that's surprised. So I think honesty in everything, from billing to, just the communication. And then the last one, which I'm getting better at, is just being frank on certain things. Part of the gig is saying the good news as well as the bad news. And so maybe that's tied into honesty, but I think being, just say, hey, look, I'd be happy to litigate this thing, but we're going to lose,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
or I'll do it. Let's do it. We'll give it our best shot, but the odds are against us, something like that. And I think that's important, because I think we all went to law school. We all want to win, and we're all competitive people, I think. But I think if you keep the eye on the ball as you do, the goal is to help our clients in whatever way we can. And sometimes that's telling them, hey, we just got to take the L here.
Yeah. What do you do to what do you do yourself to try to continue to improve the services you're providing to your clients, Bobby?
Sure. No, I think I try to self-diagnose as best I can, but I don't know if that's a fair way. I think sometimes I try to put myself in their shoes about an invoice, or things come up and I'm like, maybe the engagement letter isn't as clear as I thought, and I try to rework something like that. So I try to self-diagnose, but honestly, probably like a lot of service-oriented businesses, sometimes you don't really hear much about the good. You hear some things about the bad. I'm curious to know what you do. I kind of wonder if some of these clients that you have a trusted relationship, that you could just kind of give them a call and say, hey, what about this is working? What about this do I need work on? Without showing too much of a weakness. I don't know. Do you do any of that yourself?
We do, Bobby. Particularly with our repeat clients and our fractional
Sure.
general clients, we actually every 6 months we audit our bills and we talk to them about
No doubt.
how we're doing and how we can improve and not every client, because not some clients are one-offs.
Right.
But
Exactly.
but the repeat clients, we try to be in touch with them every 6 months and analyze how we doing, how can we improve,
Sure.
and so so I love doing that.
Well, that's good.
Last question.
Start doing that. That's a great idea, because I'm sure you get some honest feedback and you kind of know what's working. And I'm sure some things you've tried and you're like, well, maybe this isn't working as well as I thought. So I think we probably need to start doing something similar.
You know what? I've been at this almost 35 years, and I really do believe in that statement that you're either growing or you're going backwards. And
Sure.
I want to continue to improve my skills if I can till I can't do it anymore. So thank you for the compliments. One final question, and I always ask it, and I'm just going to read it to you because it's the one I ask, the last one every time. What is your best advice for our current and aspiring law professional audience on how legal counsel can best serve business clients, such as your clients, as principal partners and advisors, and not just lawyers?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. I think again, to kind of dovetail what we talked about a second ago, I think if you have a true understanding of who the client is and what they do, then you can give good advice. You can see the whole leg and see the problem's the calf, not the foot. And I don't think you get there until you have a true understanding of what their business is. And I think the only way you can do that is by taking some time. There's no shortcut, and listen and get to know them, and then be honest when you know things, and honest when you don't know things. And yeah, I think that's the best advice. I think yeah, just try to get as much information as you can, because I think we're all so used to, oh, we can do this. What do they say? If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so if we can get as much information as we can, it's not always a hammer's not always needed. So just get to know them a little better. And I think there's a lot of people like yourself that are trying to do that. They're trying to say, hey, let's be partners all the time instead of just call me when you need me. Let's, if I'm plugged in with meetings here and there, then we can avoid situations in the future. And if you have the total, understanding of the whole business model, then you can offer advice even when you're not needed, I think, to kind of avoid some things. So that's what I would say. And I think I'm finally realizing how important that is. Not finally, we've been doing it a while. It's just every day I realize more and more, like, you got to understand the whole piece there.
Folks, this is Bobby Braxton, a chemical engineer. That I want to kid with him and say he's a nerd, but you can tell by listening to this, he's not. He's a really, he's the guy that I want on my team when I have a client that has an IP issue. Or frankly, just another attorney to bounce something off of. Bobby, thank you so much for giving us an hour of your time and talking to our listeners. We are just honored that you would be on Shifting the Law.
Hey, I appreciate it. I enjoy it, as always, chatting with you, and thank you so much for looping me in. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Bobby.